Yes, I'm going to tell you about some things we realize are very different, but also some amazing similarities. If one thinks of India and China and Brazil and Russia.
When you started OLX, what was your vision? What was the problem that you're trying to solve?
Well, we started OLX with the idea of creating a used goods marketplace for the emerging world. The first challenge we had was to realize where to focus, right? So we had to think the world is a big place with hundreds of countries. No? So we decided to think like a Martian, okay? So if you're a Martian, a person from Mars, from the planet Mars, and you land on Earth and you are told you have to start somewhere, where do you start? And so why did we do this? Because it was a way to be objective, right? To be not based on preferences or legacy, but just to be 100% objective. So as a Martian, we prioritized countries based on potential, size, competitive dynamics, launch costs, etc. And well, long story short, relatively quickly, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China came up at the top because they were all large countries. They were relatively low competition. And it was a moment, this was 2005, some time ago, 2005, 6, 7, 8, those years. Back then, the world was going to be eaten up by the BRICS. Everything was, lots of investment was coming. The countries there was a lot of enthusiasm there. And as I said, low competitive scenario. So we launched, those were the first places we launched: India, Brazil, Russia, and China. And then it was different. They're so big, these countries, and so big and so different that we had different strategies for each one. So in the case of China, we actually launched acquiring Edeng, an existing small platform, and pushed it forward. In the case of India, we launched Greenfield. In the case of Brazil, we launched Greenfield, but we also eventually merged with a competitor 50-50 and became the joint venture between OLX and Bom Negocio, the competitor. And in Russia, we launched and eventually were merged into the number one player, but they were bigger than us. So we became minority shareholders in that joint venture. So we had all kinds of combinations: 50-50 joint venture in Brazil, minority joint venture in Russia. We actually acquired a company in China and a greenfield launch.
As you're talking about strategy in different countries, I wanted to ask you what fundamental differences or what visible differences have you seen in the markets of these different countries? You are from a perspective of a founder who is trying to do business in BRICS and all other countries in the world.
Yes, I'm going to tell you about some things we realize are very different, but also some amazing similarities. If one thinks of India and China and Brazil and Russia and then Argentina and the US and France, one would imagine that there's immense differences in terms of the user behavior. And we were surprised to find very similar user behaviors. People, want to buy more or less the same types of goods. They all care about similar things. They care about price if you're buying used goods, and they want to buy, safely something, and they care about, how you get to deliver the good, and you react to messages from the platform in different ways, and very similar user behavior, but very different competitive dynamics and very different infrastructure in each country. For example, in some countries, the advertising ecosystem is very different from others. So we had to use television. In some other countries, we only used, some we used air television. In some we used cable television. In some others, we used offline stuff like
Can you name the countries?
Yes,
in which you did what?
Yes. Okay. So in China, there was a lot of online. Every country had a mix, right? But just to the focus, a lot of online. In India, we had a mix. So there was a lot of offline. There was television. We did a lot of television in India. In the US, there was a cable television. In Russia, there was social networks mostly. In Brazil, it was cable television as well. It was different, right? And the prices were very different. For example, and that drove to some degree the mix. In some places, doing online advertising using the big players, it was very expensive. In others, using the same companies, but in a different market, it was a lot cheaper. What we tried to do in each one of the markets was very quickly understand how to optimize our marketing investment, right? So how to understand which mix of advertising was conducive to better users who used more frequently solutions, our website initially, our app afterwards, and who generated loyal users with high retention, right? That varied. But once they were there, and once you had the users, they reacted very similarly to our stimulus, to whatever it was, to an email campaign or a notifications campaign or a change in the communication on the website or on the app, or change all the different things you do to optimize behavior, changing text and colors, adding a new functionality. That normally worked very, very similarly across country. It's interesting. I think that to some degree we're very similar, but we operate within structures that are very different. So the structures above the people are very different, but the people are a lot more similar than one would imagine.
An entrepreneur trying to do business in multiple countries, how did you find or come to these decisions of what color to choose or what language or text or mediums? Did you do a market survey, or was it by trial and experiment, or did you just Google for the answers?
The initial one, of course, is a combination of just our own preferences and some basic benchmarking, right? That's the initial one. But after that, it's a lot of trial and error. We would test, and whatever worked, we do more of that, and whatever didn't work, we discard it. Now, building a platform that works well, in these testing environments is not very easy. But developing that flexibility to be able to very quickly learn from the audience and then incorporate that feedback into the new product development process and very quickly adjust, I think is a key to success, a very important key to success.
Watch full podcast on Rocklaz.
Rocklaz Radio.
Rocklaz.
Rocklaz.
Rocklaz Radio with Tanmay Shah.